Thanks for tuning in to Discover Stories on Reimagine Radio. Before we get started, here's a word from our sponsor.
Do you wish you had a voice in making some of the world's most popular websites more accessible? Fable is recruiting a community of paid assistive technology users who work from home to test websites and provide feedback on how they can be improved. We're currently recruiting testers who use Dragon, voice control, eye tracking, switch controls, and head mice. No resume, no cover letter, and no experience with user testing is required. Learn more and apply at www.makeitfable.com/community.
Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Reimagine Radio's Artist Podcast. Today, we are joined with Lachi Music and Arthur Gwynne, all the way from New York City. So thank you both very much for coming in today, and also joined by Program Coordinator Bryden Vino.
Thanks for having me.
So thank you both for coming.
Thank
Glad.
you for having
Hopefully
us.
you're enjoying the city.
Yes. Vancouver. Who knew?
Yeah, I know, right? Hopefully an unkept gem.
Yeah, you escaped the rain in New York to come to Vancouver where it's not raining. Seems kind of backwards.
It seems a little backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We won't say man-made, climate change just yet.
However,
Not just yet.
little
Yeah.
asterisks on
Yeah.
that one.
Tiny one.
Yeah. So before we dive into getting to know a bit more about Ramped, would you both mind letting our listeners know how you got started in music and decided to pursue that as a career?
Oof, what a heavy question. My mom says, so this is Lachi, she, her, black woman, cornrows. My mom told me that I started playing the piano in the womb. So babies would kick. Apparently, I would be playing the keys against her. But, identifying as blind, when I was super young, I was a bit of an outcast because I was legally blind. So I couldn't not see enough to be in the blind box, but I couldn't see enough to not be in the blind box. And so I didn't really fit anywhere. So I spent a lot of that alone time taking to the pen, writing, whether it was stories, songs, and stuff like that. And I was able to express myself in that way. But it wasn't really, honestly, until the pandemic, or until a bit before the pandemic, when I really started to embrace my disability and including that in my music and in my art, that I really started to, I guess, blow up, I guess is the way to put it, and really starting to touch in on my authentic self. So right now, I'm a recording artist, a touring performer. I am a Grammys board governor, and I'm on the board of several music entities. I'm also a disability inclusion advocate, a cultural activist, an author, a writer, all of the things. If anyone gives me a check, I do it. And then, of course, I'm the founder and now advisory board chair of RAMPD. And I'm here with my manager / operations dude, Arthur, who actually has his own really interesting story. So I'll toss it over to you, Art.
Yeah, no, thanks. So I'm Arthur. I'm a big and tall white guy with way too much red hair, and I identify as neurodiverse. And like Lachi said, I'm her full-time manager. I got involved really more after COVID when she was exploring, her disclosure journey, right, of blending her brand more with her disability identity, getting involved with the Grammys and kind of the functioning of how the music industry works, right? I don't have any music background at all. I'm the business guy, right? So like I started out doing like SWOT analysis and budgeting and like kind of building up a business. And as I got more and more involved, my day job, I worked for the AESC, which is like a trade association for headhunters, like search consultants. Okay. And I was working remotely. It turned out working remotely was like the best accommodation ever for myself. I hadn't known that or communicated it, but during COVID, I just realized I had so much more energy and brain space, so I started kind of doing this side thing with Lachi. And it was really fascinating work. I started traveling with her as her sighted companion when things started opening up again. And the whole time I'm just working remotely for my job, right? But it was the Grammys of last year at Vegas. My company had called the first ever in-person meeting on the same week, and I hadn't told them I was there, so I was like, "Oh, I'm sick, I can't make it, whatever." And the next day, we go to the Grammys. The next day, my boss calls, and she's like, "Where are you?" And there's this Forbes article of Ramped at the Grammys going around LinkedIn, and my dumbass is sitting there smiling on the carpet with them. And so I was given a choice of, keep my job or do this stuff. So I'm doing this stuff, and it's been really fascinating. I mean, learning the business and economics of the industry,
Right.
Getting to do like real work with real people through Ramped and through Lachi's advocacy directly, and I don't know. It's been fascinating. I'm never looking back.
So this is how you know Arthur hasn't done very many podcasts. I mean, humans listen to this. Just like confessing your whole life.
Listen.
It's an interesting story. I'll say that.
I learned a lot from the search site. It's all about networking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's really just applying that in the industry or within the disability community. And so, I'm proud of the work I did back there, but this is a whole different career path, and I don't see myself going back into that box, right? Yeah. And that was part of it. Is again, I introduced myself as an universe. I get to wear this on my sleeve and interact with people, from that disability lens, and I know the cat's out of the bag. So yeah,
I appreciate the openness.
Yeah. Well, and it obviously seems like a good fit.
Yeah, it's been really great. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the compounded passion, right? One of the big, I don't want to say complaints. I guess one of the big opportunities that has arisen within the disability community, especially from artists and musicians who tour often. One of the biggest things they say is it'd be really nice to have an agent or a manager who cares about accessibility, who's willing to make sure that I have a ramp, or who's willing to help enforce my rider, or who's willing to just care about it. A lot of folks, and I've heard this from bigger time folks, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm with this big agency, and I ask them about helping me out with accommodations, and they go, there's a ton of other people on my roster. Why would I spend so much effort on you?" Right? And maybe they don't say it in that sort of blunt a way, but that's the general gist. And I know we're going to talk about Ramped in a bit, but I want to kind of go back to what Arthur was talking about networking. I mean, one of the things that that really helped me come out of my shell, I think as an artist with a disability, one of the biggest things that we have to sort of traverse is this idea of isolation, right? This idea that who else is doing it? A lot of the times disability is so dispersed, and it's very difficult to find somebody else with a disability in general, let alone your specific disability, right? And then to find artists or creators in that space, I got to say, COVID did open things up because it allowed for more the acceptance of more virtual meetups and things like that.
For sure.
But before that, I didn't have any role models. I didn't have anyone I could point on the TV and say "Oh, I want to be exactly that," or "I want to listen, I want to hear their story on the radio and see that it's my story too, and put that on my vision board." There was none of that. If somebody, for the lack of a better example, if someone picked on me, or if I tripped on the stage and it was awkward, I didn't have a group of folks to go back to cry on their shoulder, commiserate, ask them what they did. And that whole aspect of isolation makes it so that it's very difficult to be thrown in to the music industry and already know how to network, right? So there's so many folks who are privileged in that way, like the non-disabled population, because they're so used to just socializing.
Yeah,
right?
No, you're right. Yeah.
And so when they're thrown into the workplace, whether it be the creative space, and of course the creative space is already difficult because you're kind of wearing yourself on your sleeve and saying, "Accept me." And to be able to walk around with confidence and say, "Hey, I belong here," is just not something that a lot of disabled artists have. And so this idea of Arthur bringing in this discussion of, "Hey, by the way, Lachi," and this was a conversation we had. It's "By the way, Lachi, did you know you have a really extensive network?"
Right, yeah.
And I was like, "Who?" It's just these are just people that and we listed out everyone I knew. And we're like, why don't we just table touch? Let's call them up. I don't want to call them. They're going to think like, who's like, yeah, why is she bothering me? And it's like, if they gave you their contact info, it's because they want you to contact them.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a
Right,
two-way
yeah.
street. Yeah.
And
in the
so,
name, yeah.
and that's why I'm just kind of going back to you guys saying it was such a great fit. It's just this compounded learning and care of specifically embracing disability narratives within the space of music and what we need to do to make sure that disabled artists can really be seen and heard.
Right.
Nice.
No, very poignant.
Yeah. I guess to go back to Ramped, we've touched on it a couple times now, and I think maybe some listeners might be wondering what it is. So, Lachi, maybe explain what Ramped is, what the organization does, and what the mission is.
Sure, I can talk about what Ramped is and what the mission is, and I can toss it to you, Arthur, for some nuts and bolts on what the organization does.
Perfect.
But so Ramped stands for Recording Artists and Music Professionals with Disabilities. And I got to say, our biggest achievement is the awesome acronym. Are you kidding me?
It's perfect. It's so. I couldn't believe it when I was reading it. There's no way.
So much
well.
fun.
Yeah.
And really what we do is we are a platform that connects the music and entertainment and gaming, et cetera, industries to a network of recording artists and recording professionals and industry folk with disabilities, neurodivergence, chronic conditions, hard of hearing, et cetera, sort of like pan-disability. And our mission is to amplify disability culture, advocate for inclusion and accessibility, specifically within the music industry, honestly, the pan music industry. And the way we sort of do that is severalfold. So we have a membership, right, of our network, and we allow that membership to connect with each other, which is already huge because of the isolation problem I spoke about, right? Folks get to meet each other, folks get to discuss, folks get to talk. We also offer paid opportunities. So we partner with other music industry firms, music industry labels, publishers, organizations, et cetera, to showcase to them who we are, that we exist, that there's this amazing network that exists, and we say, hire folks for your programming, for your inclusive content. And so we're able to have some paid opportunities come in, as well as visibility.
Right.
Folks in the industry honestly just haven't seen us, hasn't seen a lot of this stuff because there hasn't been an organization like ours, especially sort of like at our level, dealing with some of these folks, the Grammys of the world, the Netflix music of the world. And honestly, some of them are finding us just by Googling us because it turns out that the music industry actually does want to do this stuff as they work through their diversity and inclusion efforts. The minute somebody says, "Where's your accessibility efforts?" they go, hold on, and start Googling.
Exactly.
And then here we are to plug in that hole. But I'll say just a last thing for a bit of historical context. One of the reasons that I founded this organization was because when I joined the Grammys, I believe it was 2019, by 2020, when the pandemic hit and I started to explore my disability inclusion, I went into the Grammys and I was in a leadership role of some sort. What was I? Advocacy committee?
Advocacy, yeah.
I was in the advocacy committee where we talked to Congress to try to pass bills and stuff for musicians. And everyone was going around and saying their name in the committee and what they were about. And they got to me and I said, "My name is Lachi, she, her, black woman, cornrows. I identify as blind." And they were all like, oh wow. So inspiring. And I said that I would love to know more about the disability and accessibility they're doing at the Grammys. And they were just like, "Oh, well, not much." I mean, people are ready to just confess it because they know, like, okay, so can you help us?
Yeah, you can't fake it, right?
Yeah.
But they were like, "Well, there's not others. Maybe Stevie Wonder, but there aren't others that we know." And I was like, that can't be right. There's got to be tons and tons throughout the U.S. I'm not the only one. I kept going in rooms and them saying like, "Well, you're the first." And I'm like, there's absolutely no way. We've been around for 2,000 years since Christ, right?
Yeah.
And then like 13 billion years before that, right? There's no way I'm the first.
Just now we're finally having an artist.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way. And so that was the beginning of the journey. I mean, the Recording Academy did get behind me. The Grammys did get behind me on this journey of like, let me find other artists. Let's do a panel. We did a panel. They made it national, and they allowed for the music industry to see us. Mm-hmm. And once that panel hit, we did a panel with a few disabled artists that I knew, and the actual Recording Academy themselves. Valacia Butterfield-Jones was the president at that time. And she was like, this is such a great conversation. The Recording Academy is going to take notes, and we're going to come back to you guys with some, impact efforts. And I remember thinking, like, you guys, who, us? Like just the five of us? Like, and that was when RAMPD started. People started going in my inbox after watching that event and going like, Lachi, are you going to lead this effort then? Are we going to put together a voice that they can come back to? And I remember thinking like, my previous manager had just passed away. I had just started breaking out as an artist, and I had so much to do. And I remember thinking like, everything is in shambles. There's no way I can take this on. But in reading those messages in my inbox of like that pumped up energy of like, let's do this. Are you going to be the one to lead this thing? How could I not say yes?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I'll pass it over to you, Arthur.
Yeah, I mean, don't know what else to really add to that, but I mean, from like I guess more from like a business perspective, right? Like, RAMPD is actually really set up in an interesting way. So it has an executive committee, which by definition you have to be a professional member, which means you're vetted as identifying as disabled and in the music industry. Right. And so that's where like our president is, VP Lachi's on it now as advisory board chair. And it allows us to be able to grow pretty aggressively and decide within the community what projects we want to invest in or work on together, while making sure that the reins are always going to be held by the people that RAMPD is supposed to represent, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we are going to make sure no matter where this ends up in 10, 20, 50 years, that the leadership is always going to be from the community that it's meant to serve. I also got to say, from like a product perspective, like ultimately it's really the website, rampd.org. You can search through our pro members right there. And that was the need that this is originally filling, of saying, who else is there? It's like, well, we got 59 pro members right now, so there's at least 59 of them, right? And as we continue to expand, I mean, my favorite part of my job is, again, like this networking side. Like we're connecting with business organizations and communities. We're connecting with disability orgs and identifying members from both of those audiences that we can bring into the RAMP community, and as well as those that we can work with to expand the opportunities of our community. And it's almost like a if you build it, they will come kind of situation. Yeah. And it's just been really neat just being the glue to bind this very needed thing together. And I don't know, it's practically building itself at this point, and it's just really satisfying.
We also have we have two levels of membership, right? So we've got the professional membership, which are folks who are vetted as professionals within the music industry. And that's where that number of 59 to 60 comes from. But we also have a community membership where you don't have to be a music professional. You just have to want to be a part of the RAMPD fun. And you get pretty much the same perks. You just can't lead a committee and be a part of the executive committee. But that is in the hundreds. I believe we have like 800 or something community members. Yeah,
that's
so
awesome.
So that's been really fun to be able to watch people connect in general, but also to be able to watch the community get to point at professionals and follow them and support them and things of that nature. So it's been really great. And then another thing about the fact that we're led by disabled leaders and neurodivergent leaders within our committees and our executive committee. We're very disability culture and disability justice oriented. So when people hear the words disability justice, they think laws and rights. But actually, disability justice is a framework discussing disability in terms of intersectionality, looking at folks as whole beings, right? So the fact that there are dozens of pan-disabled, there are different disabilities. And that disability intersects with race, it intersects with gender, it intersects with sexual preference, it intersects with class, it intersects with size. And that we want to make sure that when we advocate for disability, we're advocating for disability through that lens, and that we're leaning into those who are multi-marginalized and doubly intersected when we're tossing them into leadership roles, and when we're making sure that we are getting gigs and opportunities for folks, and when we're presenting ourselves. So when we're presenting our membership, we want to make sure that the gamut of race, gender, preference, and disability is served. And then when we talk about disability culture is, the words, the songs, the art, the perspectives, the contributions that we give to the world as people with disabilities. And it's also our shared lived experiences. It's the fact that our decisions are rooted in problem solving. Our decisions are rooted in innovative creativity. Our decisions and our lives and our words and our perspectives are rooted in resilience. And all of these things should be celebrated. It comes from the fact that we navigate a world that wasn't built for us. It comes from the fact that we deal with erasure. We deal with oppression. And we deal with the fact that we all know everyone's going to have to deal with this at some point. So we're time travelers, right? We're here in the future. We're already here, guys. And we're telling you what you're going to see. And I believe that disability culture is such a deep-rooted part of the human experience, and it really deserves to be celebrated.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say, the one thing I appreciate so much is the shift from being reactive about accessibility to being proactive about it, and that's a huge part of what RAMP is doing, I think.
Exactly.
And then your whole idea around problem solving resonates, I think, what we do here.
Oh, yeah,
VAMS,
that's exactly
it's
what we do,
again,
yeah.
no one client that we cater to has the same.
Everyone's
issues.
different, but
and,
we treat everyone the same, though. It's cool.
And specifically trying to help them or support them on however far their music journey goes, which is obviously what you guys are doing as well.
Yeah, and that's the other side of this position we're trying to put ourselves in, right? Because it's professional musicians, right? Because there's plenty of things when you talk about music and disability. The first thing that a lot of people think of is after school programs, right, for
Music
disabled
therapy,
children and stuff like that. And it's that's fine. It's got its place. Music therapy, its own thing. It's helping people find their hobbies and stuff. That's great. But when it comes to, an adult trying to pursue a career, whether it's as a musician or it's in the industry itself, right? A&R reps or label folk or, literally just being in a corporate environment at Sony or whatever, there's not a lot of conversation at all. And even when you talk about corporate DEI kind of stuff, disability is still pretty far back in the rearview mirror of the music industry specifically. So other industries that have had some growth or are starting to figure this thing out, still kind of a decade behind on the entertainment side. And even when they talk about employment, you'll get into things okay, but what about leadership? What about, having disability representation in your A&R reps, the people that are, or your sync agents, the people that are making the decisions, are still not really representative, and we have to make that sexy and attractive so that we can skip the very slow crawl of corporate DEIism, right? And really just kind of be no, you want to do this and you want to celebrate it and be happy and excited to do it.
There's also the discussion too of there probably are. Right? There probably are A&Rs or, from the lower level to the higher level who do have disabilities in these corporate structures, but they're afraid to come off as, non-competitive. And we want to make it so that step one, if you are a person in a corporate situation and you do identify in this way, join us. You don't have to come out yet to your employers or whatever, but at the very least, come benefit from our resources, connect with other folks, and start pumping yourself up. Because the first thing I had to do was communicate with others and start building community and start feeling comfortable with myself. Then after that, perhaps you can start feeling more comfortable asking for the accommodations you need, perhaps even publicly identifying. But it's always optional, but the goal is for us to get folks to stop being too ashamed to even admit it to themselves.
Yeah.
So,
No, and what you're saying, Lachi, too, like just personally, like I mean, I was born with a disability, rare type of dwarfism, but it wasn't really until my work with VAMS that I really embraced it in a different way. Because when I grew up, it was, I was maybe one of two people in the school that had a disability that at least we knew about at the time. And, you kind of shy away from that. And yeah, no, the work we do here, and I also wanted to touch on what you were saying around the professional side, like the employees of VAMS, like whether our degrees or diplomas, we all did engineering and production. We weren't trained in music therapy. We kind of bring that professional side to it, but to help, I believe, our artists, whether it's Jeff or Rachel or any of these people, we want to give them that. And music therapy is its own separate thing, and there's a huge need for that. But what we try to do here is kind of, I guess, support what RAMPD is trying to promote. That's the way I would look at it.
first of all, why aren't you a RAMPD member?
Yes.
That's happening. So that's happening.
Fair enough. Well,
Get called out on our own podcast.
I know, right? Well, until Rob Calder, who put us in touch, and I'm glad he did. I had not heard about the organization. Yeah, no.
That is one of the cool things. I mean, we're literally here just because we're in Vancouver. And we're like, what's the local disability music intersection scene? And it's like, here you are. And it's like, hey, great, And so we get, again, I mean, like, Lachi travels so much. And while we're out here, we get to meet folks and expand this out, And RAMPD is, by the way, meant to be international. Like, we're fairly focused in the U.S. We've got our biggest, external stronghold is the UK, where we have 6 members in the UK.
Okay, cool.
We have 1 member in Canada right now in Toronto.
Okay.
2.
But yeah, exactly. That's like, while we're here, because there was this other guy we just recently heard about. What was his name? Anyway, but so when we get out, it's like it comes out the woodwork. It's like, have you met this person? Have you heard of that person? Like, oh, I saw this person. Or the other way around. Like, we were at Music Business Association a couple months ago, and we just had a little booth, and we're talking to people. I had 3 different professionals come up, and through the course of the conversation, it's like, well, actually, I'm partially deaf in one ear. It's like, well, guess I don't know if I can curse on this thing, but it's like, guess what? It's like, this is, I don't know. And it's, disclosure and all the identity and all those journeys, right? But community, it all starts with community, and just having a pattern, having a place to fit, and contextualizing it outside of just whatever your experience has been up to that, on the individual side of it, right? So yeah,
and each person has, I think, their own journey for acceptance, but I think embracing, that's, I think, one of the key words is I hope, I believe we are making that shift.
Right. I mean, it's difficult to quantify, right? Because it's all different internal journeys. And of course, the music industry it will always be the most difficult because it's not really visual, right? Yeah. It's not like in Hollywood or whatever where you can start seeing more folks with wheelchairs on screen or whatever. However, I firmly believe that music is one of the biggest conduits of culture.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
So, speaking of, learning about different cultures, the easiest way to do that is through music. And I think that one of the best ways we can story tell about disability culture will be through the music industry. But I wanted to touch on a point you made about how you didn't accept your disability earlier on. It's so funny because I actually had better vision younger. And they told me that I was going to have to use a cane. And I was like, oh, God, I can't use a cane because if I use a cane, everyone's already making fun of me. I really don't want to have more attention to what I'm doing. And so I didn't use a cane. And as my vision got worse, I needed the cane more and was even more disdainful of the cane. And then eventually, when I began to accept who I was and I just, started to find more success in music and everything, I decided, you know what? I can't keep walking up to a friend in the street, giving them a hug and realizing that they're a tree. I need to get my act together. And so I started using my canes. And then I started to realize as I was going to these events that Well, the cane doesn't look good with all of my different red carpet dresses. So I started to bedazzle my canes. And I
Yes.
would start to put like rhinestones and glitter. And at first it was a little corny, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, so cute. And then we just started making them really elegant and sleek. And now just part of my brand is the glam cane.
Yeah.
And I don't actually need it all the time. So if it's a really bright, sunny day and I'm just going like from my apartment to the corner store, I don't really need it. But guess what? I use it anyway because it's cute and it matches my heels. And I might actually need it. It turns out I always need it when I don't have it. But it's just, I say that because it's so full circle, because it is a testament to the confidence that my interdependence brings me, right?
Right.
Like I can confidently walk down the New York City, which is like the most tough city in the world, with my big heels, my cane, and people jump out the way and they're like, I wish. Or like, if I ever go blind, I definitely want to be her. So there's power in independence and in that self-acceptance. And that's just another thing that myself personally and we at RAMPD really hope to, amplify.
Well, Graham and I were watching your performance at Disability Inn.
Oh gosh.
And when you started, you did your visual description, said what your dress was, cornrows, everything, and then there was like little bits of claps, and then you described the cane, and everyone's like, "Yeah, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life."
Oh, she always gets bigger applause.
We actually, so at that conference, at the Disability Inn conference this year, we had done like a little side event of like glam your cane.
Oh, cool.
And so it's like bring your accessibility device and we'll kind of like, rhinestone it up. And, we thought maybe one or two people would show
We
up.
only had like 2 signups, and we were like, oh, I guess we're just going to show up and drink wine.
And then we got there, we like rolled in like 5 minutes late to our own event kind of thing. And there were like 20 people there.
Really?
There was more than that. There was like 30.
was a
There was
lot.
a lot of people.
And
That's
it was
awesome.
like everything from like dog harnesses to like walkers and like just whatever the hell people had.
people wanted to bling out their wheelchair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen.
And then the rest of the conference, there's glam
there was glam
everywhere
all over the
for like the
conference. It
second
was
half of the
great.
conference. And I was like, where did you get that done? It's like, oh, it was a Lachi thing. So like it's culture, right? And
Yeah,
it's,
no, it is.
I don't know. It was a really wild experience. Yeah.
And it's getting empowerment too. Mm-hmm. Right?
Thanks for tuning in to Discover Stories on Reimagine Radio. Before we get started, here's a word from our sponsor.
Do you wish you had a voice in making some of the world's most popular websites more accessible? Fable is recruiting a community of paid assistive technology users who work from home to test websites and provide feedback on how they can be improved.